Coming up on Legislative Review. Treating substance use disorder in state prisons. Plus, Senate Democrats unveil their proposed taxes to help fund their budget. You're watching Legislative Review. Welcome and thanks for watching Legislative Review. I'm Angela Nolasco. Making its way through the legislative process is a Senate bill concerning substance use disorder treatment in Washington state prisons. Heard by the House Community Safety Committee Thursday morning, Senate Bill 5388 proposes to change how substance use disorder treatment services are provided to those incarcerated under a special sentencing program called DOSA, or Drug Offender Sentencing Alternative. There's been growing concern that these treatments need better standards and coordination, as the current system has faced challenges around consistency and oversight. Currently, treatment is delivered by providers licensed by the Department of Health or DOH. If enacted, the bill would change that by requiring services to be provided by people licensed by the state, specifically through the Department of Corrections, setting new standards for behavioral health services with the DOC and the DOH moving in lockstep to get it done, and ensure standards with annual inspections and compliance reports. Democratic Senator Manka Dhingra sponsored the bill.
The Department of Health is actually going to be working with the Department of Corrections and coming up with joint rulemaking to make sure that they're providing the best level of care. So they're not being certified, but there is collaboration and rulemaking on the treatment that's being provided.
A previous version of the bill required accreditation from the National Commission on Correctional Health, which has been struck from the current version. Speaking to that change, Rachel Sievers of Disability Rights Washington testified in favor of the bill.
We were therefore really happy to see this bill amended in the Senate to preserve DOH oversight, shifting to a monitoring as opposed to licensing function, which would ensure that DOH continues to do this oversight function in our prisons and review behavioral health services, making their findings accessible to the public in the legislature as well.
No one publicly testified to oppose the bill. Critics, however, in past hearings have asked to get rid of DOH oversight of substance use disorder in prisons, saying DOH regulations can be difficult and incompatible with DOC, and money should be spent towards treatment instead of administrative improvements. If enacted, both DOC and DOH must develop new behavioral health standards by 2026 and begin enforcing them in 2027. Facing a $13 billion budget deficit over the next 4 years, the legislative session heads toward a crucial budget decision. As Senate Democratic budget writers unveiled their plan to generate revenue for their 2-year operating budget at a Thursday press conference. The proposal includes several key taxes aimed at addressing the state's budget shortfall, with a focus on the wealthiest individuals and corporations contributing more. Senate Majority Leader Jamie Peterson.
The voters are really interested both in making sure that wealthy people and businesses pay their fair share of the tax burden in our state, and that they don't want to see vital services cut.
The Senate's new proposal includes several new taxes, including a financial intangibles tax, targeting individuals with assets over $50 million.
We have heard the voters, right? So we're going to ask a small number of very wealthy individuals and businesses to increase the amount of taxes that we're paying. And at the same time, we are going to use some of that revenue from those very wealthy people and businesses to reduce the sales tax that all 8 million people in the state pay.
Senate Ways and Means Committee Vice Chair Noel Frame.
So first in the proposal is the financial intangibles tax, which is a tax of $10 on every $1,000 of assessed value of certain financial intangible assets, specifically stocks, bonds, exchange-traded funds, and mutual funds. This tax is only on property owned by those with $50 million or more of those specific assets. It generates $4 billion a year that goes to our public schools, which helps our state uphold our paramount duty with new increased funding for special education and the daily operating costs of running our schools.
Another key element, the employer payroll tax, which would apply to large employers with payrolls above the Social Security threshold. Similar to Seattle's Jumpstart tax, it would affect roughly 5,000 companies and is projected to raise $2.3 billion per year, contributing to schools, healthcare, and services for vulnerable populations. The proposal also removes the cap on property tax growth for public schools, cities, and counties, allowing tax increases to reflect population growth and inflation. This change could generate an additional $779 million over 4 years, supporting public safety and criminal justice.
This tax is limited to companies with $7 million or more of payroll expense. That's less than 5,300 companies in the state. It is similar to the City of Seattle's Jumpstart tax, and as such, it has a full credit for businesses that are already paying that tax to the City of Seattle.
While new taxes are a key component, the proposal also looks to repeal outdated or ineffective tax exemptions, a move that Senate Democrats say could bring in over $1 billion over 4 years, earmarked for schools and social services.
This includes exemptions like in-state hauling, gold bullion, prescription drug wholesalers, and more. And that generates more than $1 billion of revenue over the 4-year, again, just from repealing 20 ineffective and obsolete tax preferences, with the money going to public schools, public safety and well-being, healthcare, and social services.
To help working families, a proposed half-point sales tax reduction, lowering the sales tax rate from 6.5% to 6%. It's expected to cost the state $1.3 billion per year, but aims to provide relief to households struggling with the rising cost of living.
Our nearly century-old tax code relies mostly on flat taxes, does very little to distinguish between small businesses and large corporations, between homeowners and owners of skyscrapers, and between working people and billionaires. I would say it's antiquated, it's unfit for a modern economy, it is deeply unfair, and as voters have spoken loudly and clearly, they do not want us to cut critical public programs just to give a tax break to the extremely wealthy and very profitable corporations. What we are putting forward today, we are choosing not to balance our budget entirely through devastating cuts or doubling down on our regressive tax code that impacts our working families and small businesses disproportionately, but rather, as Senator Peterson said, proposing that the wealthiest among us pay what they owe to help fund our public schools, services for public safety, health care, and services that protect some of our most vulnerable members of our community, including our elderly that depend on long-term care, our folks with developmental disabilities.
The full presser is available on tvw.org. Next week, Senate Democrats will be officially releasing their proposed state operating and transportation budgets. We'll have more of that for you right here on Legislative Review.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Legislative Review. Join us nightly at 8 and 11 to keep up with what's happening in the legislature.